Hello folks, okay, let's get this show on the road. It's a little bit later than I normally like to have my stream, but some conflicts came up, so here we go. Alrighty, it's good to see you all. Let's dive straight in. Just refresh the camera. Oh. Okay. Hey, there we go. Alright. White balance is a little bit off. Alright. Alrighty. Okay, and go. Alright. Okay. Alright. So, I've had a few blips on my recent streams. So, just to catch folks up, I spent my previous stream really fleshing out this sack that Hradoth is carrying. This is the one that he originally puts Yagle in at the beginning of the story, and has plenty of his snacks and goodies in it. So did this in a couple of stages. First step was just putting a net that actually comes with the model. That was the arm that I chose to use. I put an initial layer of green stuff over the top of it with some milliput inside here to add some weight and volume to the bottom of the sack. Then last week I added some more green stuff to the top to provide the sack opening, and also to the back side to seal it up and provide a continuous join to the whole model. And that took us to this stage. So I've been using a blend of green stuff, your regular green stuff, and epoxy sculpt. And epoxy sculpt is a wonderful sculpting tool. It's a little bit more expensive than green stuff, but I blend them about 50-50 for this kind of stuff. And this week I get to actually demonstrate the reason why I do this. So here I've got some 400 grit wet and dry paper. Just gonna tear some off so that it's a more usable shape. Probably halve that again. Also gonna get a little bit of water going. So I'm just gonna use my travel wet palette here. So what I find with wet and dry paper is I'll dry sand first, and then once I've I feel like I've reached the degree of finish that I'm going to get with the wet sand, then I'll introduce water, and it provides a slightly finer finish. I might actually need to grab some coarser paper because this is not removing as much material as I would like. I don't think so. We're doing this just to get rid of tooling marks and anything else that kind of has come up with the the process of adding the green stuff just to give it a nice, nice, good quality finish. So adding in some water, and at this point I can come in and just smooth it out a little bit. So there we go. So I am going to quickly run and grab some coarser paper. I'll be back in a sec. Alright. Also realised that you guys weren't actually seeing what I was seeing, so sorry about that. Okay, so I'm not actually sure what grit this is, but it's definitely coarser than the 400. It's probably 240. Going to remove a bit more material this way. We're just trying to smooth particularly some of the folds, etc. And green stuff is normally notorious for being a bit too rubbery to be sandable, but because we've got that epoxy sculpt in the mix, we can actually sand it just fine. Keep working at this. I'm trying to remove the bumps that we have along here. These bumps are from the netting underneath, which has quite a distinctive texture. It probably would have helped to do an initial sand of that before I started laying green stuff over the top of it, but I didn't realise it was going to be quite so prominent, so instead I'm just sanding it out at this stage. Pulling out quite a lot of that, which is fantastic. Grab another piece. I actually don't think this sandpaper is intended for wet and dry, so it's pulling off the sand from the paper, the grit from the paper as I go. So I'll just do this dry initially, and then I'll come back in later with the actual wet and dry paper. Now the bottom of this is still a bit of a mess with folds, etc. all over the place. I'm not going to try and smooth this out too much, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in more material. I'll probably do that off stream, but I do want to get a good quantity of material at the bottom. I want it to feel like a bulky sack that's full of delicious treats for our buddy here to enjoy when he's not rampaging through goblin camps. So just smooth that off a little bit. As I mentioned on previous streams, the real secret to success with any kind of green stuff sculpting is to take your time, work in sections, work in layers. Remember that green stuff goes through stages. You know, you've got to mix it initially, and when I say green stuff I mean epoxy in general, but you've got to mix it initially. You've then got to, you know, you've got a kind of adhesive phase where it's kind of tacky, and you can bond it to what you had before, and then you've got a phase when it's less adhesive, less tacky, and at that stage you can really work it very well. It will still take detail. Then you've got a stage where it's slightly harder. You can kind of if you're working with fabric, for instance, if you're sculpting fabric, you know, the initial stage when it's super malleable, you roll it out flat. Whilst it's still tacky, you press it onto the surface of the model that you're doing. You do any broad tooling on it, anything that you're broadly shaping, and then as it stiffens, you can start providing those folds and not losing the surface detail, but also still manipulating it somewhat. And then at the very end, once, if you're doing the blend that I recommend of green stuff and epoxy, you can also sand it down like I'm doing here. And I do this usually a few days, in this case like a week after I last work with the material, just so that it's not causing any issues. The last thing you want is for your sculpted work to kind of rock up and tear as you put some tooling work into it. Okay, so this is kind of that last step in the sanding process. I will, as I said, work on this a little bit more, build out more volume at the bottom for the sack, so that it really does look like a kind of grotesquely big sack full of various things. But we've got the vast majority of the piece sculpted at this point. So now what I want to do is kind of pivot a little bit, and we're going to reattach his hood, pop that into place. As I mentioned, I'm keeping this separate for painting, so that it's a little bit easier to paint, because all of the flesh is underneath, so I can just, you know, do all of the fabric pieces separately and give a good deal of attention to the face without worrying about the two interacting. And we've got a few other bits here, including shields that we can use for armor, give him an effect a little bit like the described in the story for his mother, who's covered in gold shields. I thought I'd do silver shields for Hradoth himself. And of course we need to do our buddy Yagle, who is of course the voice of Behemat for Hradoth, so we've got to piece him together and build him up. So what we're going to do is we're going to find all the parts that I clipped out for him eventually. I'm missing a head for him. I'm pretty sure I set one aside. Okay. Let's gather up all the shields and armor pieces. I also set aside some Lumineth shields that I'd had from a previous project. I actually don't think I'm going to use those. I don't think that the story is set in Heish. It doesn't really feel right for a Mega Gargant to be kind of located there, so I don't think they'd probably encounter a lot of Lumineth shields, so I'm just going to pull those out, chuck them back in the bits box. But we've got plenty of Sigmarine shields, so we can really give it a Stormcast Eternals vibe. So here we go. Here is his head and his alternate head. So want to kind of figure out how we're going to position all of this, what it's going to look like as we work with it. So he's got a pair of legs. Need, as always with assembly, you want way more pairs of hands than you actually have. He's got a pair of legs, he's got a torso which has a sickle sword. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that or change it. And then we've got a couple different head options. I quite like the hooded head. I feel like that's an appropriate sort of head for him. But there is also this masked head, which matches quite nicely with Hradoth himself, and gives the two of them a kind of similar vibe. Maybe we go with that. Maybe we go with that. Now, we do need to do a little bit of work. If you struggling to get focus here, but if you look at his torso here, you can actually see that there are hands sculpted on from another git that's meant to be holding onto the back of this one. These pieces are from the Mangler Squig set. What I'm going to do is sand those down and re-sculpt this a little bit, add in some, I think I've only got milliput to hand, but add in some milliput just to bulk out the torso. I'm not sure the torso actually needs bulking out, so we may be able to just provide those. So, quick little bit of cleaning here. When I scrape stuff, when I clip pieces off of sprue for bits, I usually don't worry about cleaning them. If I did, I'd end up cleaning a million bits that I'm probably never going to use. So I just clip them off the sprue so that I can throw them into storage units and you know, take up a bit less space that way. And then if and when I do actually use them for something, even if I'm just considering it, that's usually the point at which I'll clean up the part. And if I don't end up using it, that's fine. I'll throw it back in the bits box, and when I do eventually get around to using it, it's an added bonus that it's already been cleaned up for me. So, just scrape off mold lines, tidy it all up a bit. Much of this is not going to be very visible because of the way he's going to have to sit on our buddy Hradoth. We may also kind of go in with additional filing so that he sits nicely against the shoulder of Hradoth. I want to assemble him first before I start trying to worry about positioning. So, the legs, onto the torso. Mold lines are pretty pronounced on this model. I think the dye it was cast in has probably been starting to get a little worn. Not usually seeing this prominent of a mold line on GW stuff. So start off by just carving out the most identifiable elements. And then with that done, we can get in and sand it down. Now, at the beginning of the story, Yagle is kind of sat there having eaten his way through a good deal of a farmer's livestock, and I imagine that he's probably got a pretty full belly from all of that gorging. So I think we can get away with giving him a little bit of a pot belly, and it makes it easier for me because I don't have to sand off this nearly as aggressively as I'd have to otherwise. Just obscuring the worst of the hand sculpting. Crack out a little of the old sprue goo. I'll just use that to fill this hole back here, and this one, and provide that join to the legs. And we'll also use it to smooth over the deeper creases between the hands and the sculpting here. Should be just fine. Obviously, as I've mentioned before, sprue goo does have a solvent in it that will evaporate away, so the volume will reduce as it dries, so we may need to then go back in and do some actual additional sanding. And speaking of additional sanding, I did not clean up the sickle. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this sickle here or if I'm going to replace it with something else. The story kind of implies that Yagle is not actually armed. He grabs a pitchfork at one point but loses it. So I might just replace that with something. So we're going to let that dry. I still haven't made a final decision between these two heads. So I quite like the hood. It gives it a very dynamic feel, but I also kind of like that the mask pairs well with Hradoth's mask. You know, have them as kind of masked Avengers, superhero-y kind of look. So, you know, decision made. Let's go with this guy. I mean, although the hood on the other pieces is nice and dynamic, I'm not sure he'd be moving up and down as violently on Hradoth as he would be on a Mangler squig, which is what it's sculpted for. So I think maybe this is a little bit more of a reasonable option for him. There we go. Fill in that hole because it seems a little excessive for this part. I don't think this head is originally meant to go with this torso, so looks good. Set him down and let him dry. So we've now got to consider where he's going to be on Hradoth. So he could be holding on this side to a bit of cloth. I think there's going to be more balance and more space for him to be on this side, so I think we probably have him sat kind of there, holding on to some fabric. Don't think he should be looking in that direction though, if that's the case, because everything else is moving in this line here, kind of going that way, and he is currently looking off that way, which is the wrong direction. So that's better. That's better. So if we get that into focus, he's going to be sat kind of there, looking down on all of the grots that have wronged him, that he's getting vengeance on. I think that works. So we might even try and make it a little bit more severe. Alright, so we'll let that dry. Pop him over here so that he's propped up. So, with that decision made, let's start kind of positioning out the shields that we have. So I don't want him to be completely covered in shields, just enough to give it a little bit of narrative. Maybe have a couple on there, one back here. So there's 3 on that side, so I'll set them over there. And then on the other arm, we'll need a few. So I'm going to give him one that covers over like this. Maybe just cover the forearm and not worry about any of the rest of him. So cover the forearm with another 2. Gonna add one to the thigh. Don't think the feet work very well. But I think maybe something on each thigh. It can slide up under the fabric there once I've clipped off the back piece here. So it can pop up under there. I think that looks pretty good. And then we'll do something similar on the opposite side with one. Get a matching style of shield. And not sure this one will be able to slide underneath as well. We can try. Pop that just there, that works pretty nicely. So that's another 2. So we've got 3 on this arm, 2 on this arm, 1 on each leg, and then we've got to figure out what we're doing about the belly area. We do have these ropes cast here that cease, and that's meant to be replaced with some line to connect to other things. But I think what I might do is I might just put like a band of shields around, covering that. 2, 3, 4, 5, I think. Let's try that. Just put a band of 5 shields around. Okay, so that's actually quite a lot of shields. more than I was expecting to be using, but I think it'll work pretty well, so we'll see how that goes. Gonna, yeah, I think we'll give that a go. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're just going to clean up those shields. Now I'm going to paint all of the shields separately. I'm not going to attach them to the torso until they've been fully painted up. So we're just going to kind of clean them up. And I think given Hradoth's mother gets all the nice shiny gold shields, I think what I'll do is I'll make these kind of fairly bland steel shields that are maybe pretty worn and rusted and dented. You can crack out the Dremel and drill in some dents into the surfaces of these. Maybe tear them up with a few chopped up sections like this. Just kind of scuff it up a bit. So I think I'm gonna just mark this up so that I know which one it is. So these leg ones are going to be a lot more scraped up than the belly. I think it's pretty reasonable that people are going to be able to attack his legs a lot more than his main trunk, and we'll put some scuffed up ones on the arms as well, probably more around the hands than the upper arms. Again, I think those are the areas that are more likely to get wear and tear, so we'll go with that scheme. Just kind of have notes on which ones are to go where so that we can place them at the end. Okay, so that's his left leg. So that one should slide up under there. And that looks pretty good. Crack out the right leg. I think we'll kind of carve a gash out the bottom. That up a little bit. Chip into the surface. we go. And carve away a little bit of the edging as well. Just to rough it up a bit. So we've now got the right leg. Ready to go. So we've now got the belly. We're going to do 5 around the belly, and we're probably not going to chip these up too much. Maybe just take the bottom of the points off of them, just because I suspect that'll be pretty uncomfortable for him to have to deal with. So might be good to just smooth those away. So yeah, let's prep those. I'm kind of also thinking about how I'm gonna lap them together. Maybe just try and remove the curvature on them a little bit as well. That might be a good idea. So what we're going to do is flatten them out a little bit so that the curvature is a little less pronounced. So flatten that out, and we'll clip off the bottom there and just round that off. So now I think if we lap them, it'll be a less pronounced curve. Yeah, there we go, that's much better. So just as a comparison, these are the flattened ones. And these are the unflattened ones. So hopefully you can see how much gentler the curvature is. So we're not kind of going all the way into a tight loop. We're hopefully going to follow the curvature of the torso a little bit better as it goes around his midsection. So go. Rounded off at the bottom and ready to lap onto the shield. Alright. A little bit more. Alright, I think that's pretty good going. It is, I think, what we're going to work on for the remainder of this session. Get them all ready to go. We've got left leg, right leg, we've got the 3 arms to do. Okay, so Yagala's still not quite dried, so we'll quickly continue with this and hopefully get back to him before the hour is up, and we can get him positioned on as well. I think at this stage the next step after this is going to be to get the basing sorted out. As you can see here, I have done nothing with the base. Need to kind of figure out exactly how he's interacting with the terrain. He stands on it pretty nicely, but I do want something a little bit more dynamic. I think it's difficult because obviously this is so present in the space that having him kind of kick, originally he was going to be kicking a sleeping Hradoth. I don't think that's going to work, so I might just have him squashing something under this foot, and then have some debris around, maybe like a pulled over fence that he's kind of just walked through, stomped his way through. I think that's probably where I'm going to go with this, so we'll work on that next week. I've got some squig and grot bits that I can use, so I'll piece those together. I've also, as you can see here, got a few little critters, kind of spidery kind of things, and a few shrooms. What I might do is have the shrooms kind of near the fence posts. I feel like that's a good spot for them, and they can kind of be there. I also have one of my favourite little bits from the Goblin kits is this little snotling running away from something, so we can just pop him right in the foreground, right, have him running away from this giant Hradoth, just kind of there. You have to zoom out, I guess, to really get a sense of this, but you know, have this tiny little snotling just running away terrified from this Mega Gargant that probably doesn't even notice the snotling's existence. So I like that plan. We'll go with that. So for the meantime, let's continue building out this armored belt that he has, girdle, whatever you want to call it. was a little bit rough, cracked a little bit. Some sprue glue on the back just to heal that seam up a little bit. Hopefully what will happen is that it seeps into the crack a little bit and joins it all together and gets us back where we want to be. So we've got the little snotling. Let's set aside a couple of mushrooms as well. And I think most of the rest of this will leave off. We can give them a couple of arrows sticking out of various things. We'll paint those up intact. Alrighty, and then just smooth that out. Go. That's 4 shields, and we'll have this shiny shield in the middle. Maybe we leave that one pointed. We could even kind of have them tapering down a little bit as they go. I like that idea. Yeah, I think that works pretty well. So those cleaned up. Let's clean up the basing bits, accessories. And this is tough without bending the arrow. That arrow is actually a little bit too fancy, I think, for a grot encampment, so I'm just going to use this other arrow. Oh boy. Okay. Cut that notch out of the fletching, just so that it looks a little bit more grot-like. And that's ready to go in. the worst of the seams. Okay, and I think that's gonna kind of do it for these basing elements. We've got to sort out the squig. Figure out how to flatten him. We've got to embiggen our sack at the bottom just to give it more presence, have it holding more goodies for Hradoth. And then at that point, I think we'll be ready to start painting him up. So that'll be fun once we get there. Okay, so we're doing pretty well on this now. So you know what? That's actually kind of a great place to have him. Just up on the shoulders there. That's not really where I was thinking about putting him initially, but I do kind of like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop off these chains. And we're going to make it so that he's holding a scrap of fabric. Oh yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay, so oops, pop the head off. We can fix him to the head. Just going to cut the tip off of the sleeve there, just so that it's not in the way of the hood. And there we go. I like that muchly. Alright, so we're going to do a pretty crude job of just attaching him. Do I want to attach him now? I think I actually do. It's going to make painting a little bit more complicated, but I think trying to attach him afterwards is going to be difficult. So also, just in case, going to remove this chunk of fabric here, because that really does give the impression that he's kind of floating in midair, which he is not in this case. He would be for the Mangler squig, but he's no longer riding a Mangler squig, so I'll do away with that. And then one set right there. right there. There we go. We've got Hradoth. Oh, with his buddy Yaggle flying off. That's why he's got to hold on for dear life. Look at that. There we go. I like it. I like it a lot. So I think on that note, I am going to call an end to it. Thank you folks for joining today. I know it's an odd time and a bit of a short stream as well, with a late start even for the later time, so I'm sorry about that. But we are nearly there with the assembly of this chap, and I think what I will hopefully manage is I'll clean up, finish the sculpting piece, maybe even put together the basing before the next session. I might do the basing on stream next week, and then as soon as those things are done, we'll get priming and we'll actually start painting this guy, cracking out the airbrush to get those flesh tones down. We'll have a lot of fun with that. I love painting big monster creatures with an airbrush. It's super satisfying experience. You can really mess with pre-shading and building those skin tones up, giving a real sense of vibrancy and depth to the colors. So that's going to be a fun piece to work on in the next couple of weeks. So maybe basing next week, and then I'll do the priming between sessions, and we'll get to actually painting this guy up the week after that. So please do tune in, as always, noon Pacific on Thursdays every week, which is 3 p.m. Eastern. It is 8 p.m. GMT. So do jump in and hang out, and I'll keep working through this guy. As always, thanks for watching, and